After 20 years of marriage and then divorce, I neither wanted nor needed another intimate relationship. And it stayed that way for about 2 years until one morning I woke up and there was desire. And at first it was a flicker of desire, but then it grew and I couldn't ignore it anymore. So I thought, well, I'm going to have to do something about this. And I started to think, well, if I was to meet another woman or a potential partner, what sort of qualities would I like in that person? And I thought, well, I'd like somebody with a kind heart, someone I could have an intelligent conversation with, and someone that, experienced that mystery of chemistry. And some sex would be good too. But my social world had shrunken and I just had the same circle of friends, and feeling pretty unconfident. So what was I to do? And I started thinking about online dating. And when I spoke to friends about that, they were very encouraging. It seemed like everybody knew somebody who'd met someone somewhere and it had all worked out. So I uploaded my profile. And part of what you needed to do was answer a lot of questions. And I think I answered over 200 questions. And these were to be a measure of compatibility with a possible mate. And there were things like, when you go to a party, do you want to cling to your partner the whole time? Or do you want to go off and then just check in every now and then? Or do you want to completely separate for the whole evening and only come together when it's time to go home? So I answered a lot of those questions, and that was to measure compatibility. Well, it was both terrifying and exhilarating. It was terrifying because I didn't know whether anyone would like me. And it was exhilarating because there might be somebody out there, and this desire was still there. So I went online, and then after a couple of months, a profile came along and it really got my attention. And her name was Karren. And one of the things that struck me straight away was the quality of her photographs, because I'd come across some real shockers. Some of the quality of the photographs were, not even the quality that you would use if you were going to sell your second-hand lounge room suite on a buy and swap site. And some of them, the lighting was so dark, it was like, is there a woman in there? So her photographs impressed me. She was in naturalistic conditions, like walking on the beach, in an art class, doing some painting. And the other thing that I noticed then was her writing. It was economical, descriptive, with a bit of poetic turn of phrase. But most of all, she had really good grammar. And I discovered... You weren't expecting that, weren't you? I discovered that I had a prejudice against bad grammar. I couldn't imagine being with somebody who had bad grammar. I know that's awful. But the third thing that really stunned me was when I went to our compatibility score, we were 81%. That's 81% of all the questions, those hundreds of questions we'd answered, we'd agreed 81% of the time, and no one had come anywhere near close to that. The closest had been like 60%, and I was starting to think, well, that must be good. So I sent her an email expressing my interest, and she responded, and then we started emailing. And I learned fairly quickly that she was a very independent woman. She'd worked most of her adult life for herself. She was 50 years old. She hadn't had children. And she said that the relationships she'd had, she tended to choose men that didn't commit. And she was looking to change that. So we were emailing okay over a couple of months, just slowly. And then finally, one day I got an unusually long email from her. And in this email, she said, there's something I need to disclose to you. I actually have leukemia. And I'm 17 months in remission. If I make the 2-year mark, I think I'll be in the clear. And she had equivocated about going on the site because of that. But a psychologist friend, and we know we can trust psychologists' opinions, said, well, look, if it looks like it's getting serious, tell them and let them decide. So now she was telling me. So she was feeling very positive about her recovery, getting stronger and stronger every day. So what to do? And I thought about this, and a bit of backstory. I experienced psychological trauma from my previous work as a clinical and forensic psychologist, and then having a stroke out of the blue. And I knew what it was like to have your back against the wall and to reach out to anyone or anything that might possibly help. And also had discovered that the certainties that we think we have in life are just illusions. The only thing we can be certain about is what's happening right now. And right now, I knew that she was a beautiful person and we were 81% compatible. So I said, I'd like to continue. So then our telephone conversation started, and it would always begin with a quick medical update, and then we talk about the fun stuff. But then one day she texted me and said, I'm actually in hospital again. I've had a relapse. I'm really disappointed and surprised, and I'm going to have another round of chemotherapy. Well, we were actually living 3 hours drive away, and that prevented us from having a face-to-face meeting. But now she was 2 hours drive away in the hospital. So I said, oh, look, I'd really like to come and meet you. My heart really opened to her because of this disappointment that she was experiencing. And she said, well, okay, but I might not be at my best. So I drove up to the hospital, it arrived at noon, and walked into her room. She had a room by herself. And the nervousness that I'd felt about her first meeting quickly dissipated. She looked just like she did in the photographs, albeit a bit thinner. She was sitting up on the bed with a drip attached to one arm, and she just looked lovely. And it felt very natural just to flop in the armchair beside her bed, my legs dangling over one armrest, and we just chatted the afternoon away. But during the afternoon, her specialist, the oncologist, came in, and she told me she had some reservations about him. And she'd also told me a story about her grandfather. When she was in her early 20s, she'd been to see a psychic, not something that she normally did. But this psychic had given her a message from her grandfather, and her grandfather's message was this. He said to her, you're going to have a surprisingly good life, but there will be some struggles before that happens. And she said, that sowed the seed of hope for me. And she was really living that hope then. And when the oncologist came in, they discussed treatment, and I could see that she was his equal in terms of medical terminology and debating what should be done. But he had a very brusque manner, and at the end of his consultation, all the time he was just standing at the end of the bed, he said to her, Karren, you know what's happening. When you go home, I suggest you settle your affairs, and walked out. Well, I was horrified by this. I was horrified by his bad bedside manner, but I was even more horrified that someone like that, with that opinion, would take away her hope, because hope was keeping her alive. I could see that. Well, I left. We had a good time in spite of that, and she continued her chemotherapy and went home, but unfortunately it didn't resolve the leukemia outbreak that had happened in her heart. So she then went on a drug trial, and initially that seemed to show really positive results, and then plateaued out, and that she had to be taken off. So when we talked, she was now living with her parents in their apartment, so her mother could provide extra care for her, because physically she was quite weak. And I said, well, look, I'd love to come and visit you, because she was at a bit of a loss, and she agreed. And I went and visited her with the idea that I would go camping for a couple of days after spending a night there. And when I saw her, I was a bit shocked, because in the hospital she'd looked very healthy other than a bit thin, and now she'd lost a lot of hair, and her skin was yellowing. So it was the first time I'd been confronted by something like cancer and what cancer looks like, at least externally. Anyway, I took her out to lunch, and one of the nice things about being 81% compatible is there's no arguments about where you're going to eat. And we both wanted to eat at the most healthy place. And while we're having lunch, I said to her, Karren, you know, it's hard for me to become too emotionally attached because I'm afraid what might happen to you and then the grief that I would experience. And she understood that. She said, statistically, yes, my chances are, you know, whatever. But I still feel very hopeful. I still feel positive. I still believe somehow it's going to work out. And I didn't doubt that. I didn't doubt her strength of spirit. But we agreed then that we would remain good friends and continue as things were. So I went off and did my camping for a couple of days, and I had my guitar with me, and a song came to me, a songwriter's dream, where the words and the music come together fairly quickly. And in that song, I was imagining her sitting in this uncertainty, really just being buoyed by hope. And when I got back to visit her before driving back later that day, I sang her this song, and I had scraps of paper there, and we were sitting on opposite ends of the lounge room sofa, and her mother was in the background in the kitchen, and she said, I love that song. And later on, when I went home, I recorded the song and sent her a file, and she was really, really, really touched by this song, which is the one I'm going to sing for you tonight. So things continued on, our telephone calls became more intimate, and I realised that she was giving me a lot of joy, because after a phone call I felt very, very happy and uplifted. And one of the amazing things about her was that she never complained. I couldn't understand this. She had so much to complain about, so many physical restrictions, so many things that she wanted to do and she couldn't do. And yet she just seemed to exude joy, and she took great delight in hearing about all the little things that I was doing. And perhaps because I have a writer's eye, I could describe scenes to her, places I was going to, people that I was meeting, adventures that I'd undertaken. And she would just laugh and laugh and laugh. And I think in a vicarious way, she was living through the stories I was telling her, and also the other really good friends that she had that lived close by, and good family. So the phone calls continued on, and then about the 9-month mark, we had a telephone call, and she always said, look, we really should have more frequent calls, but only keep them to half an hour because I get fatigued. But it never worked. The phone calls always went beyond half an hour. And this time was no different. It was like the hour mark at least. And I was telling her about my latest adventures. And she said, David, I've got bone pain now. And my left arm is not working very well. It's got tumours. And I felt in that conversation we touched each other's souls, and I felt such a wonderful uprising of affection for her. And quite to my surprise, the words, I love you, popped into my head. But I couldn't say them. I felt held back because I still was afraid what might happen. And I paused and she paused. It was a long pause. And then we said goodbye. And then about a week later, I texted her, excited because I was now able to visit her. And I wanted to chat to her about that. And she'd moved into the apartment next to her parents, which had come up for rental. And she'd said, look, I'd love you to come. I've now got my own space. There's more room, privacy, etc. And she texted back the same day to say, oh, look, I've actually just been coming out of hospital, about to be discharged, but it's not looking good. I didn't hear from her again, and I texted her again and then again, and several weeks went by and I was starting to feel worse. And about a month after that lovely conversation we had, I learned from her family that she'd died. And her mother said to me that on the last day, before she passed away, that for the very first time she said, "Mum, I think I'm running out of steam. You'll have to fight for me now." So her hope was gone, and then the next day she was gone. And when I reflect on that experience, having known her for 9-10 months, I thought, well, I remembered the saying of the great philosopher Forrest Gump's mother, that life's a box of chocolates, you don't know what you're going to get. And I thought, well, I found someone with a kind heart. I found someone with whom I could have intelligent conversations with. I found someone that I experienced chemistry with. And she helped me stand tall again. And I felt confident that I'd given her joy, and that I like to think that finally she found a man who could commit. Can you think of tomorrow like a little child does? The sun will rise up like it always has. Rest your head on the pillow. You've given your best. No one could ask for more. You deserve your rest. All the world over, nearby and far, people are hurting just like you are. Can you think of this morning like a little child does? Moment by moment, and see what comes. When the going gets harder and you hesitate, look over your shoulder, how you make your fate. All the world over, nearby and far, people are crying just like you are. Can you think of the future like a little child does? A book of adventures, a page at a time. Allow your heart to fill with the pain you're in, and open the door to compassion. People are hoping, yes, people are hoping, people are hoping just like you.